What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are going to be breaking down all of the free agent signings after day one. You guys like this format. I kind of liked it as well. We're going to be breaking down every single team and looking at all the available key free agents. So hopefully you guys do enjoy that. Of course, if you are new, I would love for you to join the community. We are growing at a very, very solid rate, and we'll be hitting 17K very soon, which is incredible. Also, birthday week coming up, so I'm super excited for that. We have some incredible, and I mean incredible collaborations coming in. So get excited for that. Literally starting Sunday, which will be dropped in Monday or Tuesday, and then also coming up next weekend, we have a huge one. So get excited. It's going to be insane. I mean, I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about being able to fit all of them in. So get excited. Let's get into this. Let's start out with the Arizona Cardinals. Again, we are going to be focusing on the guys who were not signed on day number one. I got to find where the fuck my mouse is. Hello. And the reason for that is that I have literally a 70-hour, 15-minute video of breaking all that down. We don't need that shit. All right. So, I mean, feel free to go check that out. But we're going to be talking about some new guys here. So Dalvin Tomlinson. So let's start with the Cardinals. Like, you got Akeem Davis-Gaither. I don't remember that if it's on the first day. If I don't remember, I'm going to talk about it. All right. It might be, but then you get some double analysis here. But Akeem Davis-Gaither, honestly, 2 years, if you have it at 5.5, he's a rotational linebacker who has a good amount of experience, I guess. So, you know, it is what it is. Again, when you end up looking at a 2-year, $11 million, it's a 1-year rental. You look at Dalvin Tomlinson here, 2 years at $29 million. I mean, you need defensive interior help. So you know what? It is what it is. I'm not going to bitch too much about it. You know, it's fine. I'm not going to, get super butthurt over, getting some actual legitimate starting potential talent there in free agency. Jacoby Brissett, good backup to have, good mentor. Like, if you just have some issues with your QB, then Jacoby Brissett is that perfect guy to just come in and be able to keep you in a game in case injury does happen. We know Kyler's a little bit of a small guy. He's very athletic, so there's always that chance there. I don't know why the hell am I looking at that? I could just look. It looks a lot better when I just look right here, doesn't it? But regardless, on top of that, we end up talking about how you guys got Evan Brown, ending up re-signing him. Obviously, on day one, you re-signed Baron Browning. Zay Jones as well. I mean, again, Evan Brown, it's interior offensive line depth at that price. Nothing really too crazy, especially if he gets reps. That's a good deal. Maybe it's not, because you should probably have even better offensive linemen, but it is what it is. Zay Jones, I mean, you're getting wide receiver depth there again. $4.4 million. I'm not going to sweat it too much. LJ Collier, again, like, high potential because, he was a high pick, but it's nothing that's crazy. Michael Walker, I honestly don't mind it at all. Like, I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be a lot. And then I never talk about, I've never wanted to talk about special teamers. So I'm just going to be, I don't want to BS you. How about that? So for the Falcons, you guys brought on Leonard Floyd. Again, this is over the past couple of days. It's the only thing that I haven't done is I'm not going to talk about the guys on day one. Leonard Floyd, I actually think that's a pretty solid signing because he's been a consistent edge too. And, you bring him back to the Georgia land, and so that's good. But 1 year, 10 mil, it's perfect. It really is. It's a low cost. I mean, especially with the cap going up and everything. You're just basically getting veteranship who can actually take reps, and I really like that. Divine Diablo is a very good signing. 2 years, 14. I'm a big sucker for Divine Diablo. I don't know what the Raiders are doing, letting go a lot of their force, because like Divine Diablo is a stud, man. I'm a big fan of him, and maybe I'm not saying he's worth like 14 mil a year, but I mean, I've just been a big fan of his ever since he ended up being a safety and picking off Trevor Lawrence. I've been a sucker for Divine Diablo, so I'm a big fan of that. Mike Ford, I'm going to be honest, we all know that's rotation/special teams. Mike Hughes, I mean, you got, again, $6 million a year to bring a friendly face that understands the system back in. I'm perfectly fine with that. Kadarius Hodge, I mean, again, Kadarius Hodge, isn't he? I'm pretty sure he's from Oregon State, man. He was really fun there. But, I mean, 2 years, $6 million, take it or leave it. I'm not going to get butthurt over that. Taquan Graham, again, you're just bringing a lot of guys back that are that depth special teams, and so I'm going to respect it. down the line. Jake Matthews, we already talked about that. And then, of course, we also talked about Grady Jarrett. So let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens, where you just signed DeAndre Hopkins. That's honestly, it's a really good signing. DeAndre Hopkins kind of trying to ring chase and also not look like he's ring chasing, because, if you just stuck on the Chiefs every time, there you go. But on $5 million deal, I mean, I know he's a shell of himself, but when you're looking at contested catch situations, I think DeAndre Hopkins is actually a really, really good target. I was a fan of Ronnie Stanley's re-signing. Obviously, super huge fan of it now when you look at all the contracts that were dished out in the trades. Patrick Ricard being brought back. Love to see friendly faces, especially at the fullback position, being brought back. Tylan Wallace, again, a good depth player. I think he was a 4th-round pick at Oklahoma State. He was a fun player. Some people thought of him as like a 1st-round pick. It just kind of shows you that not everybody's a 1st-round pick. Not going to talk about Jake Hummel. I assume he's a special teamer. Arthur Maulet and Marcus Williams got released. Marcus Williams being released does not surprise me. From my Ravens fans and from my experience, you guys were not big fans of him. Buffalo Bills, this is going to be a fun one. So we did talk about Josh Palmer, but let's talk about Joey Bosa. You guys needed some veteranship on that edge core. When you lose Von Miller, getting Joey Bosa, who has more talent, younger age, and, the question is more so injuries rather than actual ability, it's worth taking the swing. So I'm a big fan of that right there. Larry Ogunjobi, he might be a shell of himself, but $8.3 million, if you can end up getting 90% of what Larry could be, you're getting an absolute fleece. Michael Hoyt as well, very solid, veteran. You guys are getting experience on the defensive line, which shows that, maybe you are going to be going and taking more of the developmental prospects that need this mentorship. So for the edge core, if you want to look at someone potentially, maybe like Mike Green, if he ends up slipping to there, but even Jahad Campbell, if you believe in him as a linebacker edge hybrid, there's just these ability, you giving yourself capability of being able to have a more developmental player with a higher ceiling when you have all this veteranship around. Then you have Darrington Evans. Again, not gonna move me. I'll put it that way. Derek Forrest is a really good signing. This is a good system for him as well. Shout out to Marcus, that franchise guy. He had a better breakdown of it than I ever could, but I really like that signing right there. Laviska Shenault, pretty much just going to be the much worse version of Khalil Shakir at this point. So I like that because, worst case scenario, there is a legitimate role there. Ty Johnson, I don't know if he's going to have success anywhere but here. So I like the fact that you're giving him that shot. Reggie Gillum, already talked about my love for bringing back fullbacks. Long snapper is a long snapper. DeMar Hamlin, there's the storyline, you have to do it. So, I get it. He's not really going to be much, but at $2 million, he actually takes reps. So I think that's a really good deal. We already talked about the Josh Allen tweaking of his contract rather than it's not a 6-year extension. It's an extension till 2030 if I'm not mistaken, but it makes a lot of sense and it's a good deal. Then we already talked about Greg Rousseau, Khalil Shakir, and Terrell Bernard. Traded Kyer Elam. That's something that we should be talking about. Kyer, sometimes you just got to bite your losses, and I know it wasn't a crazy deal, but Kyer has been very disappointing. He's going to be going back to Dallas now, which I think he'll actually have a better career there than with you guys. So I think it's best for both parties. You got the Carolina Panthers. We already talked about Tershawn Wharton, Trevon Merrick, Pat Jones, Bobby Brown, but we haven't talked about Rico Dowdle. And Rico's a good backup running back. The dude ended up producing a shit ton here in Dallas, and we all knew he was probably the worst starting running back in the NFL, but he made it work. And that's insane. The dude produced very, very well for the talent level that he has. So for that being a backup running back, I love that because he's pretty much going to be taking the reps that Miles Sanders could have potentially gotten here and there. But Rico Dowdle proved to be someone who deserves the money, so I'm happy for him. Again, Sam Martin, not going to comment on special teamers. Christian Roseboom, honestly, you need some linebacker depth and potential starter ability. Christian Roseboom is not that ass. Then you look at the re-signed. We already talked about Tommy Tremble. I think that was a bit of an overpay. Same thing with Michael Jackson. Brady Christensen being brought back for $3 million. The flexibility he has from being a guard, tackle, and center, I think that's super duper key, especially behind Austin Corbett in a very thin center class. Big fan of that. Already talked about Andy Dalton as well. Dan is a special teamer. J.C. Horn, we already talked about that as well. Let's go to the Bears. We were talking about Dio and Grady and Drew. Durham Smythe, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about him as well, but again, if I debate it, that means we're going to talk about it. Durham Smythe is pretty much just going to be, he might not even make the 53, but good depth to have nonetheless. Olamide Zaccheaus got signed today. I think that's a really, really solid signing right there. He's somebody who took a big step up. Again, he got some wind in his sails in Washington, so I want to see him potentially do the same. He's not going to probably get too many reps at the same way that very, very bad Washington core allowed him to. But of course, got the guards in there, and then, the rest are special teamers. I'm going to leave it there. Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about TJ Slayton, Orem Burks, BJ Hill off the bat. Same thing with Mike Gesicki and Joseph Asai. I think also the same thing with Samaje Perine, which, again, because I remember talking about Jason Light having that tweet. That was funny. But you re-sign Marco Wilson as well. You can never, especially in this corner core, you can never have too many corners. And at 1.52, it is not bad at all. Or you talk about Cody Ford, Cam Sample. I honestly like keeping as much depth as possible. So I'm happy with that. And same thing with Tanner Hudson. So happy with that. Same thing with the long snapper. T. Higgins, we'll see what you guys do with him. But, for the time being, it is what it is. Of course, right now in the market is Trey Henderson. Apparently nobody's going to be, like, your owner's being kind of a douchebag about it, which, to be fair, if Trey was asking to be traded and he's like, I don't want to trade you, but you might as well see what's up, I'd be an asshole too. I mean, 17 and a half sacks back-to-back years is ridiculous. Cleveland Browns. Malik Collins got a 2-year, $20 million contract. Malik Collins is a very good defensive interior. I don't know if the need was that pressing to pay $10 million a year for Malik, but at the same time, he has, there are some players getting paid that I personally think don't deserve it remotely as much as Malik, so I'll leave it at that. Cornelius Lucas, great signing here. I didn't even remember seeing this signing. Of course, I have a 9-to-5, so I try my best to stay up to date. But Cornelius Lucas getting $5 million a year. I know he is not going to be prime Cornelius Lucas, but with all the shit that goes on in your tackle core, having some veteranship there, not a bad idea. Joe Tryon, I love that signing as well. Super high ceiling edge rusher that, he's a former first-round pick and still was getting a ton of experience. And now you might have him with an even better mentor there in Myles Garrett. So I'd love to see that. Traded for Kenny Pickett, we already talked about that. But, apparently they said you have a chance to compete to start. That means nothing in the NFL. So, it is what it is. Kenny Pickett, he's a backup quarterback. And he's a good backup quarterback to have. Then you re-sign Devin Bush. Not going to really comment too much about that. At $3 million a year, we kind of understand how everybody values that. Of course, losing Dalvin Tomlinson and then having him getting scooped up immediately by the Cardinals. There you go. You kind of flipped Dalvin Tomlinson for Malik Collins. Feel free to say which one you'd like more, but for me, I'm not moved by either. So I'll leave it there. The Dallas Cowboys, man, they're going on a whole entire run of picking up, like, literally they're trying to say another person's trash is our treasure because all these dudes are complete cheeks for the most part. Like Solomon Thomas, again, busted early pick, 2 years, $8 million. The kid still has potential, so I get it. Robert Jones, backup guard, $4.5 million, but again, relatively underwhelming. Doesn't move the needle. Peyton Turner, talk about trash to treasure. I mean, you're going to be praying that he stays healthy, but at that frame, it does make sense. You lost DeMarcus Lawrence. We'll be talking about that, so it does make sense. Javonte Williams, we already talked about that. Good signing with upside. Jack Sanborn, I actually really like that signing right there. But then you traded for Kyrie Elam and Kenneth Murray. Just going to be honest, if you can make it work, you're getting legit high upside talents, but their experience in the NFL has kind of shown that the probability is low. Kevontae Turpin as well being re-signed. He's primarily a special teamer. He's the highest paid returning specialist in the NFL, which is fine with me. But regardless, the rest of them, not really noteworthy. Denver Broncos, we already talked about Hufanga, Greenlaw. But Evan Ingram, I think we ended up talking about that as well. But I ended up talking about it on my mock draft, mock the mock rather than in anything else. So it's a good deal, 2 years, 23. This is the Joker that he was talking about, but I do think, especially with the shoulder, I think it was a shoulder surgery that Colston Loveland had, don't count it out. A 2-year deal means nothing in the NFL. That doesn't stop a GM or a coach from doing anything. And we all know that Sean Payton is the master of deception. So people I can guarantee you he might be paying $23 million to tell the Chargers, oh, I'm not going to take Colston Loveland if he somehow is there. So keep that in mind. I mean, he does like to play those games, and $23 million over the span of 2 years might be definitely worth it. DJ Jones contract, I respect it. I mean, again, I don't like the idea of continuing to deplete the solid players that you have. So I'll leave that there. Trent Sherfield doesn't move the needle for me. So I'll just leave that as well. I trust Sean Payton in that regard. And then Jarrett Stidham, backup quarterback. Good stuff. And then Strnad is going to be someone who's a special teamer. Detroit Lions. We already talked about DJ Reed. Roy Lopez. Again, not going to be an actual wins above replacement move. That's going to be raising the floor, if you will, for the Jeff Gladstones. Is it his first name Jeff? I just know it's Gladstone. I just know the dude has like less facial hair than I do when I was 16 years old. So like we'll leave it there. But Derek Barnes, I like that re-signing. I think we already talked about that. Same thing with Levi Onwuzurike. Again, I am a huge supporter of, especially on one-year contracts, maintaining the core of your depth. So I'm a huge fan of what they've done. Nothing really else that's super notable. The Packers haven't done anything really at all. So, I mean, I think we literally talked about all of this. They've been pretty silent since a pretty strong day one. Texans have been going crazy. So let's talk about it. Sheldon and Rankins, honestly, I trust them to maximize defensive interior talent. Darrell Taylor, we already talked about it, but I'm a big fan of that. Laken Tomlinson, again, at a $4 million deal, you don't need to have him start, but this offensive line's so ass that you're going to. Tremont Smith, again, it's going to be a special teamer. Nick Neiman, again, somebody who's probably going to be depth in special team. Braxton Berrios, just kind of with the depleted wide receiver core. He has experience, could end up being like kind of a shell of himself of what he used to be. Casey Toohill doesn't move me at all. I mean, these are a lot of players that are just kind of mediocre or ass. Justin Watson as well. It's like, cool. Nothing that really does move me, but you know, it is what it is. Then you got, like, it's literally such a roller coaster with your trades. Ed Ingram, just not good. I love Ed Ingram, but I understand that he's just not good. Like, I want him to be good, but he's just not good. And then Chauncey was an amazing trade. I mean, it's just a ridiculous trade right there. And, you know, you guys need that tone setter, in my opinion, outside of Azeez Al-Shaair going batshit crazy. So you got pretty much a tone setter in every single level of your defense now, and I absolutely love that in terms of the physicality. So I'm, again, big fan of how you handled that. Christian Kirk, I mean, again, talking about coming off injury, but also a relatively larger contract for a backup receiver. With the wide receiver health and the overall situation, I respect that move. So I think we already talked about it as well. I don't know why the hell I'm doing this, but Derek Barnett, I know we talked about that as well, but love, again, keeping that core if it is on a cheap short-term deal. Mario Edwards Jr., again, you guys have maximized defensive interior talent very, very well, so same thing goes for Hinish. Dare, we ended up talking about it last time. They forgot to list it, so I already talked about that one. And then the trade for Laramie Tunsil, I've come around to it a little bit more because of how much you guys ended up mentioning, like the fact that this dude is just a cancer to the culture. Somehow Kenyon Green got traded. It was for a very, very minor draft capital, so, you know, it happens. But, you know, we're seeing if Stout U can make another Becton reclamation project. And then we got the Colts. They had a good, strong first day there with Bynum and Ward. Then you got Daniel Jones here. Of course, with the mobility, you actually can run a very similar offense in case AR gets hurt. A lot of people are saying, oh, Daniel Jones came here because Anthony could end up getting benched. There's that chance, but honestly, I think the bigger issue is with how physical Anthony could be. Might be like a legitimate risk of him getting hurt from time to time, which then Daniel Jones, with that mobility and with the experience, could actually run the offense quite well. Neville Gallimore doesn't move me. Ashton Dulin, we already talked about it. And Khalil Herbert's a really good backup back. I don't know why Khalil Herbert's looked at that poorly. Again, he's no like top 32 back in the NFL, but I mean, it's good to see him on teams. I'd expect him to get 2-year contracts, but he's on 1. They got the Jaguars, raise the floor my ass. But it is what it is. De'Ami Brown, we already talked about that. We've already talked about pretty much the majority of these, including Eric Murray. Same thing with Hainsey, Adoga. Nick Mullins, I don't know if we talked about him. He's a solid backup to have. He's had some, I mean, backup quarterback's such a good job. Imagine getting paid millions to pretty much be the first team defense's bitch all the time. Like, that actually doesn't sound too fun. But quarterbacks don't usually get killed in practice. So, you know, it is what it is. It's a pretty cush job, if I must say so myself. But Then you also have that Hunter Long deal. We already talked about that as well, but at that price point, it's fine. And then, yeah, I mean, the rest has been pretty much already talked about ad nauseum. It was a very early push from the Jaguars to make all those moves. But for the Chiefs, we talked about Jalen Moore. Horrible signing, in my opinion. Just doesn't make any sense to pay that guy $15 a year. But Christian Fulton was an excellent deal at $10. Honestly, if you flip the contracts between Moore and Fulton, I'd almost be more supportive overall. Elijah Mitchell, I love the upside of that deal. I mean, the missile when he's healthy is a very, very good talent, and it's pretty much just a very cheap version of Travion Henderson, which I love. You just signed Gardner Minshew to a 1-year contract. Great backup to have. You guys have always been cycling good backups through here. Robert Tonyan, good third tight end to have. Probably won't make the 53, but we'll see. Then, of course, that Nick Bolton contract, we already talked about it. Good job, even though it's a little bit on the pricey side, still solid. Marquise Brown also talked about that, but that's good. Outside of it, not really going to talk about too much else. Nothing really noteworthy. Raiders, we already talked about, I think, Chin as well, but I really like that contract nonetheless. Eric Stokes is a very good deal. Again, I don't remember if that's first or second day, but I'll talk about it nonetheless. Landon Roberts, such a steal of a contract, such a high floor linebacker, and especially on the early downs. Raheem Mostert's a shell of himself. I wish they could get something that he used to be, but I really do think that it was I don't know if he's going to be on the roster. Lonnie Johnson, some defensive back depth. It is what it is. Then you got that Malcolm Koonce re-sign. I think that happened on day one, but regardless, I think you needed to go and take Malcolm Koonce and bring him back. He was really, really solid. Same thing with Adam Butler. Love that contract. And then pull him out. Good defensive back depth. So, I mean, releasing Andre James as well is very intriguing. We'll see what happens at that center spot in the draft. But, I mean, to be fair, Jackson Powers-Johnson could be that heir apparent to center. Please clarify that for me, because I think that's the vision. And then maybe you can go guard in the draft, but we'll see what happens there. You got the Chargers signing Dante Jackson, literally perfect for Asante Samuel Jr., happened on day one. Najee Harris ended up happening right as the video was being produced. So big fan of that. Mike Williams bringing him back. Maybe you could bring back Keenan Allen as well. That'd be super fun. I can't say that's original. Marcus, franchise guy, ended up saying it first. Deshaun Hand, like, this kind of feels like a bunch of dudes who used to be like really good, very similar to the Cowboys that are just kind of being brought on to raise the floor. Ben St. Juste on a 1-year contract is really good. I'm excited to see what that is, probably 13 to 15 if I'm just going to pull a number out of my ass. Khalil Mack was a big one. You needed to bring him back. We already talked about that. Same thing with Troy Dye. Denzel Perriman on 3.65. You need that linebacker depth. And then Jalen Reagor, again, doesn't move me at all. But Bradley Bozeman I think it's a 2-year 6 up to 12. So I like the upside of that deal to see if Bozeman can be back to his former self. But yeah, I mean, he's been atrocious. Then the Rams, Devontae Adams already happened. We already talked about that. Poona Ford, love that deal. Coleman Shelton. I mean, the interior, you need to keep this offensive line intact, and that's exactly what they did with Alaric Jackson as well. We already talked about Jimmy G, Tutu, Cooper. I mean, Cooper Kupp ended up being released today, but we kind of all known. And then Jonah Jackson, with Steve Avila doing so well, there was no reason for him to be on the team. For the Dolphins, I love this. I was saying there's no way that I could believe that Greer would pay for James Daniels. And at 3 years, 24, I don't know why the Steelers didn't pay for James Daniels, who is a very, very good offensive lineman who is, a little banged up. Then you got Zach Wilson, already talked about him. Same thing with I think we talked about Tyrell Dodson, but Tyrell Dodson nonetheless, really good signing there for the $4 million. If you ought to Melifonwu, I mean, flexible defensive back piece. Not going to say that I would love the $4 million contract, but at this point, $4 million is nothing. Nick Westbrook-Akine is a ridiculously good deal. I don't know how the hell that you got him at 3.25, but you did. Ashton Davis, especially with your safety core being so weak, I actually like that deal more than Melifonwu. Then you got KJ Britt on a 1-year deal. Alexander Madison got announced today. Good to have a power back, which I haven't really seen you guys maximize too much. Larry Borum, good depth on the tackle spot. And then you look at the linebacker, Quentin Bell, special teamer, same thing with Elijah Campbell. Liam Eichenberg, offensive line depth is what it is. Same thing with Jackson Carman. D. Eskridge, good after the catch. Breaks my heart. One of my favorite players from a long time ago. You got the Vikings. You guys ended up going and pretty much doing nothing too crazy. After day one, Javon Hargrave was a good move. I think it was like a little bit expensive at $15 a year, but nonetheless, if you can end up getting that pass rushing upside there out of him, it's going to boost your defensive interior nonetheless. And then Tavierre Thomas doesn't move me at all. it is what it is. Then you're looking at Byron Murphy. Love the fact that you guys brought him back. Harrison Smith. Okay, I did not know that you guys actually brought him back at 10.25, but you need to have that leader. I mean, it's hard to keep your core intact if you're losing literally someone who is like everybody. No one will look at Harrison Smith as not a Viking. So it's good to have him there. Same thing with Aaron Jones. It was a little expensive for Aaron, but it is what it is. Welcome to the running back market nowadays, everybody. But trading Ed Ingram was an excellent move as well. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think you released, or you have on the trade market and soon to be released, Garrett Bradbury. We'll see what happens there. But the Patriots, anything interesting happened? Robert Spillane, I don't know if I talked about that one. That's a great deal. Yeah, because I ended up talking about Morgan Moses as well. Caleb Von Chason happened today. Insane deal. The dude should be getting paid 10 plus. He ended up having a big step up last year. Huge fan of that. You got Josh Dobbs in there. Kyrus Tonga, I ended up talking about him as well, but I love that depth right there. Big fan of him. But releasing David Andrews, I mean, I just miss the old David Andrews. So I'm like, one day maybe David Andrews can bounce back, but maybe that day has come and gone. Saints getting Justin Reed. Insane contract. Don't know why Kansas City wouldn't try to fork over that cash, but they're going to do what they're going to do. Isaac Yiadom, I mean, at this point, for $3 million a year, that's worth it. I mean, it's hard to find corner depth that's at $3 million a year. You got Will Clapp, Jack Stoll. I mean, depth at this moment. Then Chase Young was a bit overpaid in my opinion, but that's okay. I mean, sometimes you can overpay if you have some cash on hand, and when you have Chase Young, you got to give it your best shot. And especially you got a new DC there in why am I forgetting Brandon Staley's name? So like, there's always that chance. Juwan Johnson, I do worry that might be like something that makes me feel a little iffy about your tight end situation for if you want to bring in Tyler Warren or not, but TBD on that. Dante Pettis, again, depth, and then Jamal Williams, adios amigo. Then we have the New York Giants. Paulson Adebo sat better with me. Already talked about him in Holland. Chauncey Golston, again, when you have Caleb Von Chase on, there's no reason to bring Chauncey Golston on. I'm just going to be real. But I digress. James Hudson, good tackle depth. And Roy Robertson Harris, we already talked about that one as well. Chris Board. Stone Forsythe was one of my favorite players, like pound for pound coming out in his class. I had like a 3rd round grade on him, and he's actually had quite a few starts. And not saying he's great, but he's been a really solid fringe offensive lineman, which, roughly equates to where I ended up having him graded, which is awesome because I was a little bit worried for a second, but Stone is awesome. Stone's a good player. Darius Slayton, he had to keep him around. Again, it's kind of sweet. It's weird and stupid that you can't keep Saquon, but that, I know, different receiver versus running back, but yeah, sometimes you just gotta ignore the 2 letters. But the Jets, we were talking about Justin Fields and Stevens. You needed to bring in Andre Sisco. 1 year 10 is a bit expensive, but you end up, deploying him like Kirby Joseph. You could see some magic happen. Josh Myers, I like getting the interior offensive line depth right there. Whether he could start or not, TBD. Then we have some, depth players right now with Smart and Weaver. Sherwood was a bit expensive, but if he ends up being consistent, it's going to be worth it. Jamin Davis is not an edge. He's a linebacker, but that's okay. Worth keeping around. Isaiah Oliver, experienced. I get it. And then you got Chuck Okorafor. Again, tackle depth. I respect it. So continuing on, CJ Mosley got released as well. We'll see what happens with him. But for the Eagles, Harrison Bryant, I don't know if he's going to make the 53 man, but he's just pretty much another tight end to add as like a pure tight end 3. Josh Uche, he's like just, again, really solid fit, coming on off a down year, so maybe a chip on his shoulder from Spag system, but I don't think he works well in Spag system. Adoree Jackson got paid pretty dirt cheap, if I'm not mistaken, at like a 1.75, and Adoree is, I mean, if he's more than that, I mean, it's but depth, experience. Sometimes you need it when you have such a young core. AJ Dillon, if he can somehow get back remotely to where he was, it'll be worth it, but it's safe to say if he's not, I'd get rid of him. DTR, I think, was just part of the Kenny Pickett deal. That's why I think you guys got him. Kenyon Green, he was a top 30 visit, so I get it. Zach Bond, you need to do it. So I'm going to leave that where that is. Again, I'm not a huge fan of that Chauncey trade, but yeah, it is what it is. Steelers, we ended up signing Darius Slay. 1 year, 10 mil. I love that. You need some veteran leadership there in the corner room. And then Malik Harrison, we already talked about him. Mason Rudolph, I get a little bit worried about the idea now, like, okay, we're going to probably bring in Aaron Rodgers. I hope to God we do not bring in a rookie at this point. I'd rather go with Mason Rudolph than try to get like freaking Jackson Dart in the first. That would blow my brains out. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers hopefully is going to be the guy. Unfortunately, that kind of means that Joe Milton is no longer on our trade radar, but maybe the Patriots were not going to get off the 3rd round pick. Then you got Kenny Gainwell. I don't think that's a good fit. Brandon Echols, I like taking swings at corner. Donald Parham, again, it is what it is. And then we talked about everybody else. I mean, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek, those are just dudes who will be taking a couple snaps here and there. Per usual, the Steelers will randomly have their wide receivers like 30 and 31 end up taking some reps in some games. Niners, Demarcus Robinson, an incredible deal. And one of the most underrated players, in my opinion, in the entire league. Mac Jones finally made it all the way to San Francisco. Big fan of that. From number 3 overall pick to getting a 2 years, $7 million. It's a beautiful thing. So maybe the number 3 quarterback, I should say. Then Trey Brown, Richie Grant, depth defensive back pieces. Same thing with Jason Pennick, in my opinion. So I'm not seeing anything that really gets me going. Like looking at all the deals that you guys have done, like really, it does feel like, I mean, especially with all the guys that you've lost, it's safe to say that you guys are trying to retool your roster for the future rather than the present. Seahawks end up signing DeMarcus Lawrence, which, I mean, veteran leadership right there at $10 million a year. If DeMarcus Lawrence can stay healthy, it'll end up panning out, but it's a big if. MVS, you're pretty much getting your DK Metcalf, but like diet version and like diet clearance version, I should say. Josh Jones has some good experience in the NFC West. I like that. Jarran Reed, I think we already talked about that as well. Jarran Reed's a solid player. So at sub 8 mil, I respect it. And nothing else really happened. So that's fine. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Hassan Reddick was the first person who got signed. So I know that we already talked about that. Nothing that really is catching my eye. Resigning Kyle Trask is fun, I guess. At sub 3, cool. But Kendall Vildor, like getting some depth there. Nothing really blows my mind from anything that did happen. I don't know if we talked about Levante David, but you need that veteran leadership. I'm telling you, like losing all the veteran leadership sounds cool, but Gladstone, you need to have that veteran leadership there. Titans, I'm not going to rub in Dan Moore anymore. Draymond Jones at 10 mil is perfectly fine. You're just pretty much getting, it's 10 million. At the end of the day, if you have cap space, you're going to use it. It's a 1-year deal. You're not signing up to a long-term thing. Kevin Zeitler was a great signing. It does kind of point to the fact that you're trying to protect your quarterback for 1 year, which means you're probably going to be investing in your quarterback for that 1 year. So we'll see probably you guys go after a QB. And so maybe that's going to change the opinion of going at number 1. But regardless, Xavier Woods, there's upside to there for sure. He's experienced. Van Jefferson, not a huge fan of that bring on, but there's worse things than spending $2.5 million on a bum. He's not a bum. He has some potential there, but I mean, I didn't love him on the Steelers, so I don't know if you guys are going to love him either. But besides that, Sebastian Joseph Day, I mean, somebody who has, familiar with the system. I'm fine with that. Washington Commanders, we already talked about Kinlaw. Will Harris, cool. I mean, depth at safety, nonetheless. Jonathan Jones is somebody who also has a lot of experience. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm going to trust the defensive signings. And like Dietrich Wise, I should say. Depth. Same thing with Eddie Goldman, who keeps yo-yoing retirement, which is so funny. Trent Scott, I don't really have any commentary on that. We don't know what the dollars are. Tunsil and Debo trades, I mean, you kind of did a good job on both. Debo's a shell of himself, but I mean, if you can end up getting somewhat of Debo back, it's going to be worth it. Bobby Wagner already talked about that. Great. Same thing with Marcus Mariota. Zach Ertz, love that too. Noah Brown ended up re-signing today. Big fan of that after he had a good year there with you guys. KJ Osborne as well. Big fan of that move because, I mean, again, keep the core intact. It's not like you want to get your team to be much worse in terms of the depth than it kind of was, which you guys maximized it so well last year. And then re-signing Noah Igbenogany. It's kind of, again, was he a first-round pick? I think he was a first-round pick. So, at least take on that role. But I told you guys we're also going to be taking a quick peek over at the players available. I know, sorry for the flashes in case you got an aneurysm there. But Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to predict. We'll just do some fun little predictions as well. It's not necessarily, this is not legit. This is not like, no. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Steeler. Russell Wilson's going to be a Giant. And then Jameis might just loop back and go back to the Browns. It looks like they're looking for that. I'm not going to do a prediction for Joe Flacco. I'm not going to do it for every player. But Nick Chubb honestly could end up being a Steeler when all is said and done. It kind of feels like it. But Nick Chubb could also, in my opinion, go and back up some other running backs across the league. So I don't really know where a good spot for Nick Chubb could be. He's just like really in the twilight of his career. Maybe actually Jacksonville. Like, we'll see what happens there. But Boobie Miles could end up going to Philadelphia if need be. Wide receiver wise, Diggs and Cooper could both end up going. Diggs and Amari Cooper should probably both go to Dallas. They need as much help as they can over there. Cooper Kupp would be extremely intriguing to see on the Steelers. Like, I mean, Rowan Wilson, you don't want to rush him back from injury. If we do have the money to spend and Cooper is cheap enough, you can add him with Aaron Rodgers, and I know it's going to be that whole entire meme about not Joe Montana. I mean, you got Jerry Rice in there. I'm trying to remember Dan Marino, and I'm forgetting Randy Moss. So it's like you can get the old heads up in there, but sometimes they work. I mean, old but gold is a legit thing. Then you got Keenan Allen, again, a reliable slot. I'm very surprised that he hasn't been tested out. Elijah Moore's in there, not really a big name anymore, in my opinion. Outside of that, don't really see anybody I really want to talk about that we didn't talk about on the first day. Nothing really is going to get me to talk about Tyler Conklin anytime soon. Offensive tackle wise, Tyron Smith, I still think that Kansas City needs to make a strong push for him, or New England, and I wonder if that's why they haven't signed yet. But like TBD on that. The rest of them, I don't really have too many comments to bring into the fold. Interior offensive line, Tevin Jenkins. I really wish before you traded for Kenyon Green that he would have ended up going to the Eagles. But, other teams that can have good reclamation projects, I honestly trust the O-line coach of the Giants. So I would love to see him try to work with Tevin Jenkins going forward. Mekhi Becton, I do think, might end up going back to Philly. But there's a couple of teams in there that certainly could be looking his way. Arguably, one of them should be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think that's necessary. We need to go after an interior offensive lineman. But, I mean, this is a player who's going to be a cornerstone of the interior of the offensive line with tackle versatility for the next 5 to 10 years. And I mean, if he's not super duper expensive, if you get him at 12 a year, I mean, James Daniels just went for 8 a year. I'm just saying, could take a big step up, but you don't have to overpay the way that the Packers did. Got to throw some shade every now and again. But all those guys, I'm going to be leaving that there. Andre James would not be a horrible signing if you wanted to for the Panthers, in my opinion. You got pretty much nothing going on at the center spot at the moment. You got a couple guys on 1-year deals. Why not toss in another? But edge defender-wise, again, there's nothing that's really good on the table for anything. Like, I'm just going to be so real. Like, none of these guys are really moving the needle for any of the teams that at least we haven't talked about yet. So we'll leave that right there. Interior defensive line, again, Calais Campbell, we already talked about him last time. I'm not really moved by any of these guys, and that's what's getting a little bit scary for teams that are still having legitimate issues in certain spots. Linebacker-wise, for some teams like CJ Mosley and Eric Kendricks bring that veteran presence that, I mean, I'm very surprised some teams do not value. Like, it is kind of strange, head-scratching. I know they're like shells of themselves, like, it's fine, but I mean, the mentorship you can provide to rookies and how smart both of those players are is kind of wild. And honestly, I could see CJ Mosley going to Dallas. I mean, to replace where Eric Kendricks once was. But it's surprising. It's surprising to see those guys not at least sought after. But outside of that, again, not super moved by any of the other options at cornerback. Like, Rasul Douglas is still very solid. I would try to bring him back to the Bills. That would be my dream. Bring him back. I mean, to be fair, I almost said the Packers. I mean, that's not a bad spot for him to be. Asante Samuel Jr., really hoping he goes to Pittsburgh. Behind Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr., I could really see them having a really good trio there. Stephon Gilmore, I think, needs to go back as well to Minnesota. And there you go with that. Safety-wise, you got Justin Simmons there. I mean, it is possible people want him to go to Philly, but he's more of a name than anything. That's my biggest issue. Like, same thing with Marcus Williams. So maybe they're destined to go to Dallas or something. But, I mean, again, pretty slim pickings. That's what I'll say. Pretty slim pickings regardless. But that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching, showing the love you always do. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.